Hello. Okay, g'day everybody. My name's Adam Goodrich. I am Procedural Worlds, and today I wanted to talk a little bit about how to create beautiful environments in Unity 3D. This is something I've been specialising in for about 4 years now. So hopefully all of you want to learn some stuff as well. So what I want to talk about basically is just a brief introduction on me, talk about what we're going to create, some of the challenges that you have when you're creating environments, the assets I'm going to use. So I'm going to show off a whole bunch of new stuff that doesn't exist in the asset store yet. There's some alpha stuff in there. Then I'm going to talk about terraforming, how to populate your worlds, how to light them, how to use timeline and some really cool new stuff that I've developed, which is open source and free. Do a fly through, and then for those of you interested, I'll do a demo of Gaia too. It's actually a hell of a lot to go through in a short amount of time, so hopefully we'll get there. So my background is I'm a 30-year tech veteran. I specialise, for the past 4 years in environmental tool generation. It's a very big change from being in the corporate world, but it's actually a lot of fun. I'm also a part-time game development teacher at TAFE at North Sydney. In terms of my creds in this space at least, I created Gaia. Has anybody not heard of Gaia? Good, you've all heard of it. I also created GeNa. So Gaia is like your big, broad paintbrush. GeNa is more of the fine, it's like the touch-up brush where you're doing organic spawning. CTS, created with a Polish guy, and we were just recently at a finalist in the Unity Awards. That's a terrain shader. So of the people here, how many of you have used Gaia? How many of you used just Unity terrain in general? Would you consider yourself beginners or experts or somewhere in between? Beginners? Experts? Cool, can learn some stuff from you guys. And somewhere in between. So I guess my stuff is sort of like an end-to-end pipeline for environmental generation in Unity. You don't need to use my stuff. A lot of the stuff I'll talk about today, you can use any tool you like. So I know there are various different tools out there that people like. These techniques cut across those tools. I also created Pegasus, so I was creating all these beautiful environments, and it sort of killed me when I'd create a really good one and go, oh, now I'm going to delete it and then start again and try that technique out again until I got it right. So I created Pegasus, which is a really nice tool to quickly create fly-throughs. If we get time, I'll give you a quick demo. And then the next thing I created earlier this year was a thing called World Manager, or WAPI. And the problem was that I was trying to solve is I'd create these environments all the time, and it was a real pain to try and integrate with the lighting package and with the terrain and with the weather. So I created this thing. It's free. I'll give you a demonstration of how powerful it is. And it acts as a middleware between all of the different systems in your game. And it provides a lot of the more common sorts of things you'd like to do with your environments, like what time is the game at the moment? Where is the world? How big is the world? Is it raining? Is it snowing? And so on and so on. So it's more environmentally focused, and it's a system that's also gotten some support from some of the other asset producers. So a lot, Tenkoku, Enviro, a bunch of weather systems all support this. So if you plug this into your game and then just talk to this, then everything will be in sync. And then I'm just about to release another product. It's an asset importer. So for a project I was working on recently, I had to bring in all this Megascan stuff, and I'll show off some Megascan stuff. And I don't know, how many people here put together assets and import assets fairly often? I don't know about you guys, but I found it an absolute pain. So I thought, I'll create something to automate this. And I made this thing work for Megascans, and then I thought, wow, this is a really cool tool. So then I extended it to be a generic importer, texture baker, an asset or prefab maker. I don't know what I'm going to call it yet, but I'll give you a quick demo of it. So what I want to do is just give you a high-level run-through of how this stuff can all work together. I want it to be really hands-on, so I'm mostly going to demonstrate rather than talk. I want to create a pretty environment from scratch. We'll do something that's really going to stress the machine, and I'll show you how to make this stuff run well in Unity. I'll show you some shiny new stuff, and because it's all shiny and new, there's a chance it'll break. And some of this stuff is so new. For example, this morning, I was integrating Enviro into my scene and went, okay, I'll just plug it into Weather Manager. It's broken. So then I sent this panicked message to this dude in Germany who created Enviro and said, dude, it's not working, you've broken it. And I removed it and then added it back in. And then he came online and said, oh, yeah, no worries, ding, 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 ding. So there might be a few hiccups, hopefully not too many. All right, so what are we going to create? Let's create an interesting environment, 2K by 2K, which is the Gaia standard. We want to start at the south end of our environment and drive the player north. I want a mountain at the northern end to be like a visual marker for the player to move towards. I want a river, I want a nice forest and beaches, some interesting areas for players to play. I want some nice lighting, time of day, interesting clouds. I'll show you off some really beautiful new stuff that's coming to Enviro. Version 2, it's awesome. And I want to have dynamic weather. So I'm not going to aim for low-end machines with this. I only want to show you some beautiful stuff about what Unity is capable of. So I'll be targeting mid to high-end. All of the stuff that I'm showing you, or the majority of it, can be configured to the platform you're targeting. So while I'm pushing it to show you really pretty stuff, you don't necessarily have to do what I'm doing. If you have any questions, feel free to sing out, because I'm going to cover a lot of stuff, and if we wait till the end, chances are, you'll have forgotten and I'll have forgotten. So just stick your hand up. I don't mind stopping and answering questions. If it gets too much, then I'll just move on anyway. So time. When you're creating these environments, if you've ever done it yourself, it's really time intensive. First one I created, which was about 4 years ago, it was terrible. It was blurry. I used all the terrain tools that come with Unity. I spent 2 weeks painting this thing, and at the end it still looked terrible, because I'm a software guy, not an artist per se. And that led me to this, down this track. But creating a decent-sized environment and making it really nice is a very time-intensive process. The purpose of these tools is to speed that up. The idea is that you spend more time focusing on your game than you do on creating the environments. If you've been doing this a bunch, often you use a lot of different tools. Now I'm going to show off a lot of different tools, but only because I want to give you an introduction to some cool stuff that's coming. So some of Gaia and some of the other tools out there, they take a lot of things and they put them all into one package. I want this, from a design perspective, the tools I'm going to demonstrate, they can be fully procedural or somewhere in between. I'm actually going to go artist-driven but semi-procedural. So I'm going to design the environment that I want so that it suits my game, but I'm going to leverage the power of procedural tools to speed things up. I'm going to do some really nice stuff visually. Obviously, you need to target it. Performance, the more stuff you add. People say to me, can Gaia do VR? Of course it can, but you have to configure it, right? You don't do a desktop scene in VR and expect it to perform well. So the more stuff you do, the more stuff you add, the worse your frame rate gets. So you've obviously got to target things. The other thing to consider is, where's your market going to be by the time your audience, or by the time your game launches? So if you're targeting on the limitations of lower middle-end PCs today, but you're not going to launch for 2 years, then you're limiting yourself. So think about where you're going to be as you're choosing how you build your environment. Something I've noticed as I've created lots and lots of these environments is that I get designer fatigue. So let's say I put some trees in the terrain and some grass and stuff, and I start clicking in the holes, and it doesn't look very good at all. So one of the benefits of some of the procedural stuff is it actually takes you out of that designer fatigue. You say, I want that area to look sort of like this, but you let the procedural stuff do the work for you. And then I think, No Man's Sky is a classic example of, it's a fully procedural world, but it's infinitely boring. It's infinitely big and infinitely boring. So you know, my sense, and that, you know, people say, oh, can you do infinite worlds with your tools? And I'm going, no. And it's not really a goal of mine to be able to do that. Because I think the environments we create as game developers are more interesting if they're crafted. You know, you put in the interesting stuff that the experiences you want your players to have. All right, almost finished talking. So some of the stuff we're going to be working with, Gaia we'll use for our world creation. CTS we'll use to make the terrain pretty. GeNa is what I'll use to do some of the interesting spawning and show you some stuff that you don't necessarily know about. Aquas is how we'll do water. There's a new, the guy that I created CTS with has just released a new river shader for Unity called RAM. And it's really pretty cool. Basically you create a spline and it works out the height and then changes the flow of the water based on the height. So no mucking around with flow maps and all that sort of stuff. Really nice tool. Enviro, which we'll be doing for weather, lighting and clouds. Vegetation Studio is another tool that's not launched yet, but I think it's going to change if you're doing environmental large world scenes, it's going to change things up substantially. What it's doing is it's actually instancing everything. So your grass, your trees are all being instanced, and this can make a massive, massive difference. Some of the stuff I'll show to you will be a great big screen full of trees on a laptop, and this thing's still going to be running at quite a decent frame rate. Megascans, I'll show you some cool assets from Megascans. So if any of you saw the stuff I put on IGDA, the really pretty stuff, that's all Megascans. Speed tree for some trees. I'll show you this Megascans import process to show you how quick and easy it can be. For villages, we'll use 3D Forge exteriors. I'm actually going to use Unity Post Effects version 1 because Aquas has a conflict with version 2. I'll show you this World Manager API. I'll show you a timeline to control all of this. And then if we get time, we'll do a Pegasus fly through. All right. Let's create a world. So that scene there is something that I created with Megascans assets. And if you've ever done stuff with Unity billboarded grass, once you've seen this, you never want to go back. And if you've ever then put that stuff into your environment and watched how it performs, it's abysmal. So I'm going to show you something of this fidelity, but running really nicely. So I've taken the liberty, excuse me, I've taken the liberty of importing a bunch of stuff just because it's pretty boring watching importing. So the first thing I'll do is I'll open up Gaia and create ourselves an environment. Gaia works on the, so that I don't waste your time going into too much detail, does everybody have a sort of high-level understanding of what Gaia is? Great. Was that a yes or a no? No. All right. Fantastic. Yeah, no hands up means no. In that case, I'll go into a bit more detail. I don't want to... There's a lot of content to cover, so I didn't want to get into too much detail. Gaia, there's about 20 or 30 odd videos. There's massive forums. I have a ticketed support system, so if you have any questions, just send it to me and it won't get dropped through the cracks. So there's a lot of material outside of this session which you can use to get yourself clued up on Gaia. And one of the things I'm going to be doing is putting together a bunch of really in-depth tutorials where you pay a nominal amount of money and you'll get a lot of coverage of Gaia, GeNa, lighting, and all the other stuff that I'm covering at a high level here. Just purely because there's so much stuff to go through, there's not enough time. All right, so Gaia, the idea behind Gaia is it's 1, 2, 3, click a button, make magic happen. So I was actually talking to one of my TAFE friends, and we were talking about the difficulty that people have when they create 3D environments, and a lot of new people to game development stay away because it's too hard. I thought, what if it was as easy as 1, 2, 3? And that was what I created. So Gaia has this concept of defaults, which are the overall settings for your environment, and then resources. So these are the things like your textures, your trees, your grasses, and so on. And Gaia treats the terrain like a big blank cookie dough. So the idea is, you know, you take a mountain and you just go stamp, and you stamp your different shapes into the environment. And that's one of the things that Gaia's done in this space that's been fairly, because you all know how to place a 3D model into a scene. Well, it's just, you know, a terrain-based 3D model. So what we'll do is we'll create our stamp, a terrain, and show a stamper. So what Gaia's just done for us, if I zoom out here a bit, rearrange things. So Gaia's just used this information and created a terrain for us. For those of you who know about these things, it's quite a large terrain, 2K by 2K, height of 1,000 metres, and a lot of other stuff which you don't need to care about. And what I've done is I've created this thing called a stamper. Now Gaia can automate the whole thing. You can just press a button and magic will happen, or you can design your environment. I'll just show you the automated stuff really quickly just to show you what it can do. So I've got a thing called a session manager. Everything you do in Gaia is, every step is stored in a session, and what you get at the end of it is a tiny little file. And that file you can share with other people. You can use it to back up your environment. And you can also use it to replay your scene when you make a stuff up. So it'll recreate the same thing, blade for blade, accurate in terms of grass from scratch. So I'm going to go into my random terrain generator and just hit add stamps. So what it's doing is it's iterating through all the different stamps that Gaia has. The stamps are mountains, rivers, valleys, all sorts of different things. And it's based on some criteria here. It's basically created me an environment. So to make it work, I just hit play session, and it's going to actually create this environment for us. This is fairly quick. Gaia 2 is essentially instant. So where this might take 5 or 10 seconds, Gaia 2 takes 10 milliseconds. It's not ready yet, but it's coming soon. So what it's doing is it's just layering bits and pieces together into our environment to create a new environment for us. So if we zoom in a bit, we've got some sort of mountain over there, some lowlands, sort of interesting little mountain areas here. Sort of an interesting, you know, there's lots of flat areas, so that if you're playing your game, your players have got lots of good places to play on, and so on and so on. Now, I wanted to create an area where we're going to drive people from the south to the north. So let's imagine that north is up here. So what I'm going to do is now manually add to this environment and make it into the game that we want to have. So I'm going to go back to my stamper. It's all sort of messed up by the automated process, so I'll just delete it. And then I'll go and show a new stamper. Now what I'm going to do is I'm going to customize this environment. So I'm going to go to my Gaia directory. And Gaia comes with, getting on towards 200 stamps in all sorts of categories. So we've got hills. And what Gaia does is it gives you a grayscale, like a height map. It's an image where white is high and black is low. So if we drag one of these things onto our environment here, and I'll just unlock it, you've now got this stamp, and we can change its height and lift it up. So we can basically have a lot of control. It gives you a little preview mesh, you can rotate it and scale it and so on and so on. And then you can move it wherever you want it in your scene. So if you've ever used typical procedural content generation tools, you hit the number and hope it works. Whereas this is giving you a huge amount of control over that. So what I want to do in this case, I want to create some really interesting and custom mountains. So I'll just fit my stamper back to the terrain, and these are some environments that my son created for me. So simple that a 14-year-old could do it. There is in one of the tutorials, I show you how to get real-world environments into Gaia to turn them into stamps, which you can then put into your games. So in this case, I'm going to grab some of these mountains that my son's found for me. So let's grab the Barren Mountains. Pop that out of the rope. And they're a bit high. So there's my original environment. Let's put them back over in the northern end. Maybe make it a bit less wide so we get more of a higher thing going there. Rotate it. So to add this into our environment, we basically just hit, I'll turn off the preview so you can see it, and we hit stamp. And this is what the automated stuff did for us. And boom, now we've got a nice little mountain range. Now I said I wanted to make it a bit more interesting, so I add one more. Let's try this one. Now this stamp here, if I stamp that, it'll basically create this big ridge here, which will look terrible. So what I'm going to use is what I call a distance mask. And that basically is, it's just a curve. And the center of the curve, that represents the center of the stamp. And the right of the curve represents the outer side of the stamp. So what we're going to do is blend the stamp in full strength in the center and nothing on the outside. So what you can do is create these nice natural morphs from one terrain type to the other. So I don't want that stuff to hit my scene. If I go over the top here, move that over here, drop it down a bit. Try and manipulate the mouse. Alright, so let's blend that into our environment. So turn off my preview so we can see it. Cool, so now we've got some mountains at the northern end of our island. Now the other thing I said is I want a river, so let's add one. I'll go to my stamper again, turn on my preview, and this time I'll choose a river. So these are actual scans from places like Colorado that I've captured and stored in Gaia. So this comes with Gaia. Let's grab this one here, drop it into my stamper. I guess what I'm trying to show you here is this tool, even though it looks relatively simple, there's a lot you can do with it. So I'm going to rotate this way. Move it over here. Shrink it. Yes. Yep. In fact, I use World Machine to generate a lot of this stuff. Yeah, when I first started, it was World Machine, and then I was using GeoGlyph as well. So, and there's a thing called a scanner underneath utilities. There's lots of little utilities. Gaia's more than just a, it does lots of different stuff, and one of those things is this thing called a scanner. If we go to our scanner here, you can basically drag and drop terrains onto this. You can drag and drop 3D models with colliders, and it'll actually make a stamp out of that. You can drag and drop your World Machine R16 files, and also raw files. Even images. You can drag in a grayscale image, and it'll convert it into a stamp. So the cool thing about Gaia is you're not limited by the stuff I've created for you. You can basically go to town with whatever you want. So I'll get rid of my little scanner. Back to my stamper. Oh, wrong one. Finding only one screen fairly small, interesting to work with. I'm going to use this distance mask again. Might rotate it a bit. There we go. And we'll stamp it. So it's created this really quite aggressive river thing, but it shows you the concept. Alright, so we've created our environment, right? And the next thing we want to do is texture it. So go back to our Gaia Manager. And go back to our standard. So the first thing we did is created our environment and showed our stamper. Now we're going to create our spawners. So the Gaia treats the process of putting stuff into your environment and calls it spawning. So you're spawning resources into your environment. So we're going to spawn textures onto the terrain, trees, grass, villages, all that sort of stuff. Now I could do an automated Gaia end to end, but I'm going to show you some other tools for those of you that already know Gaia as well. So I will, however, do the spawning for the textures. So what's happening now, as we look at this little progress bar, Gaia is iterating across every single location on the terrain and evaluating this set of rules against it. This stuff's all completely customizable, so you can do whatever you want. You can put your own resources into it. So I've got games like Pantheon, Crowfall, all sorts of different types of games, very stylized games, some of them, using Gaia to do this work for you. Anybody who's ever textured a terrain by hand knows that this is an incredibly painful process and hard to get right. So pretty soon we'll have all of that in the terrain. In Gaia 2, this takes about 10 milliseconds. It's amazing how quickly putting all the work onto the GPU just changes everything. Cool, now I've got a textured environment. So the next thing I'm going to do is, normally with Gaia you then create your game objects, so this would be things like villages and so on, and then some trees. I'm very conscious of time though, so I'll show you some different things. And then even the grass all gets spawned into the environment. But we're going to use another tool, and I'm going to show you how to make this work really, really fast in Unity. You can do this, there are lots of different ways you can do these sorts of things. But we've got our Gaia environment here. Let's add a player, and let's have a look at it. And with Gaia, I'll show you how to do it. In fact, I need to do it this way. I want to create my... Part of the rationale behind Gaia is it does all the heavy lifting for you. So I'll get rid of that, and I'll add my wind, my water, my screenshotter, and my player, just by hitting a button. So what Gaia's done is it's gone and created all this stuff in here. It's using Unity water, which if you've ever used it, it's pretty average. It doesn't perform very well, doesn't look that great. So I'm going to swap Unity water out for some other water, and quickly configure this up. So I'll put that back. So I'll just show you how it looks right now. So we've got our nice environment. I'll quickly turn some things off. I don't want to hear footsteps. I want to go fast because I want to show off this stuff really quickly. And I don't want to lock the mouse. So it's popped us in about the middle of the terrain. We wander around. There's that river that we cut out. It's a bit jagged, but it was just to show the concept. You know, it's a nice, reasonably big environment, and it's done a lot of the work for you very quickly. Sitting there at about 200 odd frames a second, and that's without adding anything into it. It's just raw terrain. So the next thing I'm going to do is I'm going to make that terrain look better. If we look at this for a moment, you can see with Unity terrain, excuse me, there's a whole bunch of tiling. If you go up close, it's just generally boring, I think. So let's make this terrain look better. So here's... If we rotate this guy. Let's make this thing look a heck of a lot better. So we'll go CTS. So this is our terrain shader. So we've created an environment. Now we want to make the actual terrain look nicer. So I'll just make sure we're in linear deferred. And then we're going to add CTS to the terrain. So this configures the terrain automatically. The whole you know, my whole thing is make it easy for people, make them so they don't have to think too much. So if we look in our terrain object now, it's actually got CTS, and it's waiting for us to do something with it. So CTS comes with a whole bunch of content already. So we've actually, CTS itself comes with a really nice texture library. It's got stacks of really high quality textures. It's worth the cost just in the professional textures you get with it. But it's also got them already configured for you. So we can just go, you know, click that, wait for Unity to catch up, and just go apply. And instantly, what we've done is we've transformed that terrain. And then we can go to the next one if we don't like that one. Hit apply. And hit apply again. So let's go with G4. Here we go. I've been playing with snow. So what we've done, you know, with a click really, is completely transformed our terrain. I'll just turn snow off. So there's our new terrain. If you compare it, the vividness of the colours and the interest of the terrain itself, it's a lot more interesting than it was before. In CTS, we've got things like procedural snow, so you can set up your snow. We've got things like geological settings, so you can basically, you know, if you want to create a desert scene and you want those horizontal, nice deserts type of geo stuff, just plug in another one, for example. Maybe another one. We can get in and really muck around with this. So obviously I've gone a little bit nuts with it, but you know, down a lot, if I just tone that way down, if I could zoom into the environment here, let's say we want a bit of interesting geo in our mountain here, so just turn down. We can go into our textures and our sand, and we go, do we want geo on my sand? No. And then we can go to our mossy ground, do we want geo? No. So see how we're actually really, really finely tuning the geo to suit our environment. And then, you know, what about our grass? Do we want someone there? No, not really. The interesting thing about geo is you can take an environment where you've only got, this is only a 4 texture terrain, and you can radically change the way it looks just by adding in a bit of geo. And some of the stuff that, once you play with this a bit, and you get these nice strata on your rock walls and so on, it looks really, really cool. So our rock face, we do want geo in our rocks. The other thing we've done here, you may not be able to see it from this view, but we also have triplanar, and we turn triplanar on and off by texture. So triplanar is an expensive effect to render. So what we've done in CTS is we've gone, okay, only render triplanar on those textures that actually need it. For example, on your cliff faces. What triplanar does is it stops the sort of the texture stretching that goes down the side of cliffs. All right, so we'll leave that as is. Have another quick look. Let's have a look at our environment now. So there's a bit too much geo going on there, but notice how the rock textures are really popping. And, you know, there's no, or essentially no tiling anymore. So we've changed our environment quite a bit. I think I'll change to another one. Maybe try G6. One of the cool things about CTS is it takes this profile. So if you ever use Unity post effects, same concept. You store all your settings in a profile, and to apply them to a new environment, you just hit apply profile. This can all be done via code as well. Actually, I'll go back to the other one, look better. All right, so we've got our terrain. Let's add some better water. This Unity water is pretty average, so we'll get rid of it. And it's also expensive. Once we start adding in a lot of trees and stuff and it starts doing reflections, it really shows into your frame rate. So we got rid of our water. So one of the things that Gaia does, if I bring up Gaia again, rather than trying to do it all myself, I said, well, how about if I integrate with other people? So Gaia has a API, which is really easy to use. And if you support that API, and you install your product into a project that Gaia is in, it'll then expose itself via this menu. So I'm going to go into Dogmatic and add Aquas to my scene. My scene. I'm really curious as to why I'm not seeing it. Great. Usually Aquas works first time every time. This was part of the stuff that I was doing this morning. Let's see here. Could be because of Enviro. Tried that one. There we go. Enviro's not in the scene yet, and the shader that I was using solves a problem with Aquas and Enviro. So we've got our environment here. Let's run down this hill real quick. And now we've got some really lovely water. That performs pretty nicely. So we've got our water. We can do underwater effects and all that sort of stuff. We've got our terrain. It's now looking a bit better. I'm going to turn the geo off on those rocks. It's a bit too much. Bye-bye geo. Cool. So the next thing I want to do is add some villages. So the way I typically approach creating environments is I go big to small. So I start with the big stuff, so we create the terrain and that sort of stuff, and then the water and so on. And then I start to add in villages and the bigger props, and then I go down to trees and rocks and so on and so on. So for this I'm going to use GeNa. With Gaia you can press a button and have it do the whole thing, but I actually want to show you how to actually have more control over the process. So if I had my farm spawner in here. So this is a spawner. It's got 3 different farm prototypes in it. And if I look inside of these things, these are collections of objects that have been laid out in a spatial pattern to look like a farm. So let's go down here and add a farm. So I get shift click, click. And there's our farm. Now again, if you've ever done much of this work, you know that setting that up is a complete pain. So the power of GeNa is what you can do is you can lay out your different types of things, whether it's farms or graveyards or whatever, on a flat plane, and then drag and drop them holus bolus into GeNa, and GeNa will actually then do all the work of placing them into your environment. So if we look at our fences here, they're perfectly conformed to the terrain. So they go down the hill, for example. So let's go and do one halfway down the side of a mountain and see how this can go wrong. I'll find it more interesting. Make it go really wrong. How about here? So what's happened here is our house is built at a really odd angle. The fence is sort of conforming. That's pretty cool. Although it has a, it's not quite perfect. The wagon's on the ground, that's good. The wood's on the ground, but our house is completely skew-if. So notice on these settings here, there's a C. That means conform to terrain. So I'm going to fix my house. Which farm is this? Farm 2. I'm going to turn off farm 1 and farm 3, and we'll just focus on farm 2. And I've got to find it. There it is. I'm going to, instead of conforming to the slope for our house, because houses usually go straight up, we won't conform our house to the slope. And then we'll try and spawn them again. And notice how the house is now doing the right thing, even though everything else is conforming to the environment. So obviously you would never try and build a village on the side of a hill like this, but if you wanted to, you could. You can do things like, if you want objects to actually work on slopes, you basically build a base on top of them. And if you want them to work on really steep slopes, just build a bigger base so that when you embed them into the terrain, they work properly. So I'll quickly go and spawn some more farms. Yep.
Could you dig up the terrain instead?
You could, but not with GeNa. You'd use, Gaia has the ability to do, actually I did show you a subtractive, I dug out the river. You could, I often will set an almost, I don't like flat environment, I like a little bit of movement, so I set my stamps to be almost straight, and then I set them, I put a distance-based blend curve into it, so that in the centre it's nice and straight, and then out the edges it sort of nicely transforms into the environment. So I do it that way, and it's literally just takes you 5 seconds. So let's turn on our other farms to get a bit of variation here. Yes. In fact, you can even do something which is really, really cool. Let's say I wanted my farm to point in a certain direction. So I haven't set it up, but the purpose of this is to show you this stuff. So I'm going to go draggable rotation. And what I'm doing is I'm going shift-click and then dragging the mouse. So you can see it's going to place the thing in the direction I want it to. Now we'll focus just on farm 2 for the moment, because I don't want to spend too much time setting it up. But with your farm, we've got a couple of settings here. First of all, there's the rotation that we place whatever it is that we're stamping into, or putting into the environment. So in this case, I'll set them both to the same thing, and as I move the mouse, you can see this little number here moving. And then there's the rotation of the object itself. So it's got this concept of a forward rotation. So if I go click here, so it's not, let's say we want the farm to be going maybe in that direction. So I might just try that. Getting closer. Maybe a bit too far. No, completely missed that. Went the wrong way. Anyway, you get the concept. You can basically, you can work out which way's forward. I'll just start from the beginning again. Almost there. I won't waste your time, you can get the concept. So let's just add a few more of these things in. Anybody who's ever done this by hand knows exactly how painful this is. And I could actually do this across the entire environment. The next thing I'm going to do is I'm going to add some trees. And again, I'll use a GeNa spawner for this. GeNa, add spawner. And I'm going to add, GeNa can spawn things as prefabs, or it can spawn things as terrain, native terrain things. So in this case, I'm going to use a native terrain tree that's already been set up in my terrain. And it stores things in what it calls a prototype. And this tree, there are 2 trees in this terrain, it's a broadleaf desktop. So I can go down here and go, okay, let's put some trees. You notice around the tree there's like what I call the, oops. Yep. It picks from. Yep. Yep. In fact, I'll show it to you. I'm very conscious that we are really running out of time. I haven't showed all the cool stuff yet. Oh, I won't show it to you because we haven't got time. But yeah, you can. Like I often will do things like I quite like the Alaskan cedar. I think I might have saved it as a prefab. No, I didn't. So I'll put the main tree, then I'll put the tree, the outline of the old tree that's just got the, it's bare. Then I might put the young and the spring and so on. And then what you can do inside of GeNa, if we add another one here, is I can go, okay, I want this one to spawn all the time, but I only want this one to spawn 13% of the time, for example. So you can actually set up the ratios in which they'll spawn, and you can get some really nice natural effects. There's a lot of other capability of the system, but we just don't have time to cover it. So just quickly add in a few more trees. Now you can see the spawn area. I'll turn off that one. Increase the spawn range. You can see how it's automatically detecting collisions with other things. You don't want your trees to go through your trees or through your houses. And the throw distance is like, if this was a seed, how far would a seed be placed away from this tree? And then let's spawn a bunch of these things between 1 and, not 65, let's say 13. So it's now actually creating you these nice sort of trees. One of the things that GeNa does, which is really, really powerful, it's, Gaia's magic power is stamps. GeNa's is sampling the environment. Notice if I zoom back out here, it's selecting for this area, but it's ignoring the hills, which is sort of what you want. So GeNa has this concept of this thing called spawn criteria, which is sort of like Gaia, but you can say, okay, I want to check height. So let's say I only wanted to check within 6 meters of where you clicked. So it's basically looking plus or minus 3 meters of where I clicked on the terrain to work out what it can do. This is really cool if you want to do a cliff or a path going down the side of a hill. Or I might go, let's also check slopes. Now we're checking height and slope. Turn off check height. So it's sampling where I'm clicking on the terrain and saying, hey, I only want slopes within 30 degrees of that. If I drop that range or increase that range, you can see how it's selecting up. We can also do things like purlin-based masks. So if you're doing grass and that sort of stuff and you want to get some interesting variation, you can do all that sort of stuff. So now it's actually, it will only put those trees in these sorts of areas. Or I can go shift control click and actually run this thing over the entire environment. And boom, it's just done our entire island for us. Which, if you've done this, is a complete pain in the backside.
Come on, give him a break, it's flooded recently.
That was operator error. So let's get rid of those trees. In fact, I'm now going to show you the next piece of cool technology. I'm going to show you really, really quickly because we've got only a short amount of time. So I'm going to add Awesome Vegetation Studio. So this is one of those tools that's not quite on the asset store yet. Awesome Vegetation, add it to the scene. Boom. It's just called trees. I knew it was going to do that. And now I'm going to start it. And I'm going to quickly drop in a setup that I did earlier. Now this is really cool because this is the tool that's doing all the instancing for you. So this is how, when you want to go higher quality and still maintain your frame rate, this is how you do it. So I've set this stuff up earlier and it's just working. Oh. Of course that never happened before. Given how short the time is, I'm going to really speed go through the rest. And I'll show you something really pretty, really quickly. So of course we've lost that scene, but I'm going to get it back. Yeah, I'm going to use my session. I said there was this magic tool called a session manager. So let's go back to this one. This looks like the one. Yep. I think I selected it. And hit play. Magic will hopefully happen. Many wouldn't, and haven't. All right, so it's busily recreating that entire environment from the ground up. So while it's doing that, the next thing, I'll try Vegetation Studio one more time. If it crashes us again, maybe I'll show you something else before we do that. Yep.
Does it automatically save for every process that you do?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah. So that's this session management. In this little panel down the right-hand side are all the steps that we took to create this environment. So we did, remember, we created an automatic one, then I manually configured it, and it's going to run in, it's basically stepping back through all this stuff. And the cool thing is, that terrain, if we were to share it with each other, would be about 20 to 30 megabytes. This file is about 400K, so it's tiny. All I'm doing is basically serializing all the different things into a file. So the next thing I'm going to show you is Enviro. It's a really, really awesome tool, and it's going to do your weather and your lighting and all this other cool stuff. I don't know if I'm going to show you Vegetation Studio, given what it just did to me. But I'll try it because it is really worthwhile. What Vegetation Studio is, it's intersecting everything. So that scene that I had, which was really rich before, without Vegetation Studio on this machine, it might have ran about 30 or 40 frames a second. After putting Vegetation Studio in, I'm looking to get 150, 200 frames a second. So it is really that dramatic a difference. What it's doing is it's doing all sorts of clever stuff. Up close, it's doing things like automatically instancing all your trees. If they're a bit far away, it'll billboard them. You can do things like automatically put colliders just when you're close to the tree. So if you're far away, you don't need the overhead that goes with it. And it does some really beautiful grass shading and so on. Is it almost there? Okay. So we got our environment back, some of it. We'll get Gaia to do the rest for us. Don't need any more spawners. We'll add our character, our wind zone, don't want to have water. Quickly get Aquas back. And now I'm going to add also, remember we had to change that shader as well. I'm going to add Enviro. Hopefully Aquas will start working properly now. Yep, it is. Cool. So I'm going to quickly configure Enviro. So this is this really, really awesome new tool that's just about to arrive in the asset store. The guy that made this, he used a research paper from Breath of the Wild as his basis for doing the clouds, and I'll show them. They're really, really beautiful. You're going to have to go really, really fast. We'll change our time. That's what I wanted. I don't want clear skies, I want clouds, because these clouds are cool. So let's run this. So if you've ever seen Unity clouds, most of them don't look this good. This is still alpha software, so still doing some work on it. So we've got nice water, we've got nice clouds. We can very quickly, let's control the weather. So I need to add CTS. We'll turn CTS back on. The snow's going a bit nuts there. $5 minutes. Damn it, there's too much to do. We'll turn off our snow. So very quickly, we've sort of got back to a start. I'm gonna take a punt and add this vegetation studio again. It is worth the effort. And if it doesn't work, I'm giving up. So, let's try again.
So does Unity's terrain follow system
No. Unity's terrain system is, as they even say themselves, it's a band-aid on top of a band-aid on top of a band-aid.
I remember back in
Yeah, that's pretty average. Okay. So, hopefully it's not going to break. Please don't break. Come on. Yes! So I'm going to just drop the ocean down to about 50 metres. Just wait for it to catch up to us. Hope it doesn't crash. All right, let's give it a go. So what's sort of interesting about this, I don't have the right camera in it, but that's running at about 60 frames a second, and now it's actually a really rich scene. I don't like the lighting, we've got no post effects, so let's quickly add some of those. Do Gaia. Okay, this is not as good as I'd like it, but we will have to do. I don't like his volumetric lighting, hasn't quite got it right yet. I'll add one more thing. We don't have time. So now we've got a little bit of post effects in there. The lighting hasn't baked. We've got no grass. We'll add some grass. Last thing. Yeah, it's very dangerous, but hey, what have we got to lose with 3 minutes to go? So, vegetation system, start it. I was going to show you megacat scans and a whole bunch of other really cool stuff, but this is still pretty cool. You can put anything that you like, and I've integrated GeNa into it, and I'll be integrating Gaia. So the thing with this is it's all procedurally done. The problem with this, in my opinion, is that your game is not going to be like that. You want to have really fine-grained control, and that's what GeNa is all about. It's giving you control. So I've integrated into it, and then basically I also make Gaia work so that you can use any tool you like to control it, and you can get the power of the instancing, but without necessarily having this blanket thing going on here. So last thing, go into my vegetation. I'm going to add my grass. It's a Megascans grass that I imported. My grasses. Okay. I really quite like this clover. So this is how easy this is to set up. So here we've got nothing. We're going to add some clover by adding it to a grass. And boom, we've now got this really beautiful grass. And then let's add in, seeing we're really pushing things, bit more. So there's, now I don't like how dense that is, so I'm going to turn it down a bit. And I won't go into too much more detail because we just don't have time. There you can see just how pretty that is. I haven't done anything much in the way of creating any sort of optimization on that, so it's running pretty shittily. But by the time I finish optimizing this stuff and this product gets out of beta, that'll run at least 100 frames a second. And if you look at the grass meshes, it's a bit hard to tell, but that's pretty high different resolution stuff. All right, sorry I ran out of time. I wanted to show you so much more. Does anybody have any questions in 1 minute? You can configure it. So actually what's adding a lot more is the grass, because that's all really high quality stuff out of megastands. You can basically say, I want the trees to go out to say 50 metres and then start to do logs and then billboards, and it's all instance. There's the guy that created this has done a GPU indirect instancing system, and none of the shaders on this are set up for it because they simply ran out of time. But that means that instead of updating the GPU every frame with, hey, draw this, draw this, draw this, it basically updates it once. And only when you change, and it's all done on the GPU, will it update what's been sent. So Lennart's had this running at like 200 odd frames a second. Cool. So it's probably a good segue. And it's night time. Can't see. So, you see that? All right, so if you're interested in that sort of stuff, go and sign up to my newsletter on proceduralworlds.com. Over this week, because I'm presenting at PAX, if you want to ask me questions at PAX, I'll be on the TAFE stand just near the indie developers, and I'll be happy to show you more detail, because I just ran out of time. And then I'll give away a complete suite of my assets at the end of the week to one person that signs up this week for free. And I'm on Twitter, and you can email me, and so on and so on. Yes. Beers are on Unity, yay!
So when you were demoing CTS, you had normal maps and LV to support PBR maps and parallax as well?
It's full PBR. I actually showed you just the basic, but there's an advanced one with height blending. There's another one with tessellation, and you can choose. It also does cutouts. It does lots and lots of stuff. Yeah. Okay. Thank you, everybody.